I made a bunch of writers read the first 3 pages of my silly werewolf book. And they called it spicy, but they used another word. I'll tell you the word. My cheeks are already red. I took myself on my very first writing retreat. Okay, if you don't know what this is a very authory or writery thing to do. Very niche, where you basically go on an artist's retreat, except everyone's a writer of all different kinds. So you can either do one with a group, you can do one by yourself. Some people just go towards the end of their book, like they'll book a hotel somewhere and write the whole end of their book in peace with no distractions, like just pure writing for like a few days where you have to remind yourself to stop and eat and stuff like that. I had never done that before. Like I usually just lock myself in my room for these things, but I thought it would be fun to go with a friend of mine who's also writing a book and see what it's like, because it was specifically a queer writing retreat, and that is where I brought my silly werewolf book. So welcome back to week 11 of Let's Make a Book Baby, where I'm taking you all the way from the beginning of writing this book until I publish it. If you haven't heard about this book, yep, it's a werewolf book. It is a steamy werewolf book, to be exact, and it's very gay. So the 2 main characters are both Omega men, and if you don't know what Omegas are, they're like one of the werewolf genders in the Omegaverse, which is a type of werewolf lore, or honestly it doesn't even have to be werewolves, but I'm using it as werewolves because, I don't know, alpha, you associate that with a wolf falsely, I will add, which we'll talk about some other time. The science isn't there, but I just really like that combination of combining shapeshifters with the Omegaverse, because usually it talks about misogyny, and Ari is a trans guy, and Marcus is also cis, but his wolf is gender fluid. So in my world, they kind of have their own personalities, their inner wolves in their heads that they transform into, which give them a lot of more primal qualities. And so I think it's kind of interesting playing with the idea of like human versus primal. Anyway, I went to my first writing retreat and I brought the boys along with me. I was very nervous the whole time. If you don't know this about me, I have OCD. I also have PTSD, and like part of my OCD is social anxiety, but I think that if everything else plays off of that, and so for some reason it just was to the extreme. I don't know why it hit me harder. I feel like I've been doing better in group scenarios, but it was really hard for me to talk, which was so ironic because in the first night we got there, we were talking about like introducing ourselves, but it was just like our name, pronouns, and then something about our lives, and everyone else was getting kind of deeper, and I was like, what do I share? And I was like, I'll just tell them that I'm trying to be more expressive with you here on YouTube and on Twitch and social media, things like that. Well, I had a very hard time with that. In person, but everyone was extremely nice, very welcoming, and we all gave feedback on our work. So yes, I made them all read the first 3 pages of my werewolf book in advance, so that would be what they would give me feedback on. So I will get to that, but I'll tell you all that we did, because in the meantime I had been writing this book throughout this trip. That was the purpose of why I came there. We did do some more writing prompts than I anticipated. Like, it was more focused on prompts and analysis and giving each other feedback, which I absolutely see the benefit of still, and it was still very helpful. I think I had it oriented differently in my brain of being like, okay, I'm gonna get a lot of time to write. We did have a lot of free time, so I tried to use that time to write at least a little bit. I do think that our writing prompts gave me some ideas. So like some of what we did, I'll tell you what they were, so in case that you want to try these out, I feel like it did give me a refresh. Having someone else tell me what to write, I feel like got me a lot more unstuck, and I'm writing a little bit freer now without overthinking every single word. But it was really funny because part of what happened is that like I was trying to push myself to make sure that I shared things. As soon as I got there, I realized, oh, this is one big OCD exposure. Like I have to do the exposure in order to push myself to have less social anxiety. Otherwise, it'll just keep getting bigger. And so So I was trying to get myself to speak up whenever I had a thought, which literally made me feel like I was sprinting for like 10 minutes straight, like my heart and everything. And I was like, mentally, I'm not that worried about this, but for some reason, that's how my body reacts to this. It's just like chemically ingrained within me to react that way. So by speaking up, I was kind of like teaching myself teaching my body that it didn't need to respond that way. But I'm gonna have to do a lot of practice on that now that I've seen that as an issue. I'm actually gonna talk to my OCD therapist about this today. But like part of what we did the very first morning after we had slept, and I was super tired. I couldn't sleep very well. We were doing like a writing warm-up where you would just, this was what they said. They said to describe a sound your character can hear or that you can hear if you're writing by yourself. Describe the character's surroundings. Something has a smell to it. So it's supposed to be like sentence by sentence you would go through. So for some reason in my brain, it didn't compute that these weren't just like isolated sentences, so I just wrote a bunch of random sentences that were vaguely werewolf themed because I was trying to apply it to my book somehow. But there were things that I would literally never write in my book. But it was good. It still warmed me up. Then they were like, okay, think of like a monumental situation. They weren't very specific about it, but I was thinking like, okay, I'm thinking about a monumental situation in the story. And Ari and Marcus have had this for a while where Ari accidentally bit Marcus on the neck where you would mark someone to soul bind yourself to them in this werewolf world. And so they're stuck being half bonded, and Ari has a lot of guilt about this. So the prompt was to write 8 minutes before the scene happens, the monumental scene. And then the second prompt after that was 8 minutes after. So I tried to first write Marcus's perspective. This will have some spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers about how the actual incident happened, which I probably won't explain till the end of the book, then skip to this time right here. Ready? Ready. Okay. From Marcus's perspective, we see that this incident actually was something that Marcus kind of wanted to happen, but he didn't know how to ask for that, because he's an awkward teenager back then when that was happening. And then 8 minutes after the incident, Ari panics, runs away, thinks he's done something terrible to his favorite person. So I feel like it got me reoriented in thinking deeper about their characters. It made me feel like, okay, I am remembering all their motivations and it's going to be easier to write about them because yeah, switching back and forth in a dual perspective book, I forgot how difficult it is. You have to think in 2 separate brain spaces or however many that you're using, but I'm doing dual, so that means 2. Between the 2 of them, they both know things that the other doesn't, so I have to keep track of that. When I'm writing Ari's perspective, I can't have him know things that Marcus already knows because that will defeat the purpose of having them communicate, which is the entire book. I think it was really interesting to have them dive into that a bit more in what actually happened, like play it out in a very short time that I had to write that. It inspired me to keep writing more of the scene when they reconnect finally in this book, like where I'm at in the actual book itself. So that was cool. But in my solo writing time, it started to feel like, okay, Mari. This is the second time I've given them a ship name. Marcus and Ari. What did I say? I said this on stream. I said Arcus or something. I don't know how I feel about either though. You're gonna have to choose the ship name yourself, okay? Mari and Arcus. Okay, I'm calmer. Marcus and Ari, they're still way spicier every time they get back together than what I'm intending. And I'm like, okay, am I like jumping the gun too much? That's a weird American phrase. I shouldn't say that because YouTube will smite me. Am I skipping over too many of the important good bits? But no, because it's going to get really spicy. So I was like, maybe this is actually setting the right expectation. So I started to think about the first 3 pages that I had turned in, and I was like, oh my god, I hope they don't think it's really creepy, because in the second or third paragraph, Marcus does this thing that he always does with Ari that I think you're going to probably have a good freak out over. It's something that they always do, and it's one of those things where you just are like, hello, hello, have you not seen yourselves? Like wanting to grip them by their shirt and shake the truth into them, you know? Um, so basically, Marcus does this thing where if he senses that Arya is stressed or he just wants to feel more connected to him, he will put his hand on the back of his neck and like basically touch the back of his neck. And so I was like, that sounds really creepy. Like, if you don't know how close these are, it started to creep me out because I started overthinking it. You know, this is like part of OCD, and technically overthinking is not the right word, but that's how I'm explaining it to you if you do not have OCD. This is called rumination, where you go over the same things over and over again and check to see if it contains any of whatever you're obsessing about, as in having distress about. And so in this case, my distress was worry that I was going to write something that disturbed people because I have a fear of causing harm. I started being like, oh my god, this is really creepy. And then by the second day, it was time for me to get my feedback. And what we were doing was sitting in a room together, looking at whatever we had each turned in to provide feedback, and we were only allowed to send 3 pages in. Since that was all that we were allowed to say, I just decided to put the very, very beginning of the book. So this is the opening of the book, and we were allowed to ask one question. And my question was, does this feel like a strong enough opening of the book? I took a bunch of notes. Oh my god. I took a bunch of notes because they gave me so much feedback, and I was laughing so much my face was bright red. So the good news was that they were asking all the questions that I would want them to ask as a reader. They directly pointed out literally everything, like bullet points from my brain practically, of all the questions I wanted them to ask. So what is happening at the beginning of this book is that Arya and Marcus are preparing to do something at this summit, which you're learning is like a crazy gladiator competition between the leaders of the Lycan world. So all of these werewolf leaders come together each year, but I was going to explain that like on page 4. And they didn't get to that part yet. But you're supposed to start asking because it sounds very dramatic, because Arya and Marcus want to go in and change the gender expectations that everyone holds around it just being alpha still. And they're like, come on, like, we need to progress a little bit. More than just alphas can be leaders. And so Ari is just going to go in there, basically butt into the competition. But the opening is supposed to make you curious for that, because all we get is Ari's main desires that he voices out loud of like, I want them, like as in all these crowds and all these people, to see their own prejudice and unpack it just by him going in there and showing that an Omega wolf can be strong too. Everyone really likes that. Even if they had no idea what the werewolf lore was about, they were like, yes, we want the gender dismantling. Like we want to see like what type of, like, what's he going to do? Is he like this social justice figure? Like, how is he responding? And Ari is a very unique character in that I didn't want him to be like someone who wants the praise of that. He just wants to make a point. So he's going there to make a point. I think that by the end of that first section of the book, you'll understand a lot more about Ari and Marcus because of that, and you should be asking those questions leading up to it. So I was so relieved of like, okay, what is he really like and what is he trying to do? What is Marcus's purpose in this? Because I made sure that Marcus has a job. Marcus is helping Ari coordinate this and making this happen because he believes in this message and wants to basically support Ari in everything he does, but in turn it's also supporting all of them because Ari is standing up for everyone who isn't a big buff alpha. There was one thing going into it because I'm the type of writer who likes to focus on character development. So sometimes in my first draft, I will just leave out a lot of the environment's description. So I know that some readers don't like that, but they probably just won't like my type of book that I write in general. So I kind of am like, okay, like of course I add a lot more in for the final drafts. Like literally I'll go back in as I'm editing before I send it to my editor and add in just descriptions of the world around them and stuff like that. And I try to keep it to just like a couple sentences setting the scene and providing an emotion, because otherwise I feel like it's really hard to pay attention for me when I'm reading a book, and that's not the purpose of the book. So one person did point that out, but pretty much everyone right away was like, no, actually I disagree. Like they were saying that there was enough detail about the scene because the importance was based on the characters, which was my intention. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, when you're an author, I feel like you have to learn how to decode people's feedback. And so the second I heard that, I was like, yeah, this person probably doesn't read this genre, first of all. Second of all, might prefer more literary fiction rather than like a romantic fiction. There are times where it can be like, oh, maybe I did skip the description, but like the other people had mentioned, since I did put a description in there and the importance was on the characters, that was my actual intention. So I shouldn't go back and edit that and disrupt the flow that I have just based on one person's opinion, because yeah, that's part of my job to parse out, is this a different audience than what's intended, or like that's reading this and giving this feedback, or is this like something that I actually need to change? So that was really interesting. Otherwise, I feel like everyone did actually really like my description, which I was like not expecting at all. They liked how I described the snow and the forest around them. They're in Sweden, and I don't feel like that's my strong suit. So I was kind of thinking like all these people who were primarily writing poetry or nonfiction or more literary types of writing, I was like, oh, I think they're probably not going to think my description is very strong, and they didn't have to mention that. So I felt that was like nice feedback, like maybe I've improved. But like mostly what they had pointed out were the feelings between the two of them. So apparently, like I think I'm very used to how mushy my books are, and I forget that like my readers have told me this, of like how like cozy or tender, mushy in the sense that like you feel like you're in the scene with them, like getting a big hug. Because I like to make my characters have a lot of emotion with each other and be very sweet to each other. So another writer kept describing it as like so tender, and I was like, that's really sweet. Like I'm glad that's coming across well, even in this first draft. So I'm excited to show it to you, like very, very excited. I feel like, oh my god, I just need to put the first chapters on Patreon so you can read it with me. They literally pointed out specifically the thing with Marcus touching his neck, and like they were like, oh my god, like feels like erotic but also sweet. And I was like, perfect. That's exactly what this series is like. That's how I wanted my Shy Alpha to be, and that's how I want this world to be, to kind of carry over the same beloved elements that I really liked within the first series, of mixing this like very romantic and even sexual storyline with tender emotions. Like I want them to feel like they have a lot of emotional intimacy, and that is just as strong as any other type of intimacy that readers might primarily be seeking when they want to read a spicy romance book. They also gave me feedback that they liked the type of representation where in this world it seems like the issues are more based around the werewolf gender equality rather than having it be a direct problem that someone is queer, which I'm actually very, very happy about, because that was definitely my intention. Like I like having this werewolf world where that's not an issue. Like even Ari being trans is not like, oh, this is a big problem, like because once you come out and you're surrounded by people who are actually accepting of you, it's kind of something that goes into the back of your mind until you're around people who are not accepting of you anymore. It felt really nice to hear that that was something that they still wanted, especially when I know I've come on here and been like, oh, like I feel like sometimes people don't gravitate towards my work unless I make it more about LGBTQ 101 like lesson, and I'm just not wanting to keep writing that the rest of my life. So having them feel like that was like such a relief and like really representation that they wanted, that meant a lot to me. And I think that was like my biggest takeaway of being like, okay, I need to keep doing this. Like, even if it seems like a silly werewolf book, I need to keep doing this. Yeah, I also wanted to mention some point in this video that a lot of people are feeling a lot of extra stress this time in our country, in the United States. I hear you. I know that so many communities are being targeted right now purposefully to make it extremely overwhelming for everyone. So that is what you should be feeling, in the sense that you are responding appropriately. And if you are going numb, that means that you might need some more care from those around you or from yourself. So please take care of yourself. Being in the trans community, in the disabled community, having a lot of different things happen to me throughout my life, I am in a state where I feel a little bit less surprised than I think some other people are. And I'm not saying that as that you shouldn't be surprised. I think that regardless of when you realize all this is a problem, it's still a problem, and we need to keep treating it like a problem. I think for me, it feels like more confirmation that people are getting it. So I'm actually starting to feel a little bit more relaxed in a weird way, despite all of the chaos happening, because I feel like we're a little bit less alone. More people are all pitching in. And if you don't know how to pitch in and you want to pitch in, I would like to suggest, regardless of who you are, to base it around something that you love to do or that you feel you're really, really good at. This doesn't have to be like a skill that has to do anything with politics. In general, what people are calling politics right now, this is a social issue. Politics are involved in everything. So just forget about the business side of this and think about the human side, because that is what has gotten a lot of our previous communities through these times. Let's say you are really good at being a friend. Any friend that you feel like is really good at picking up a lot of this trauma and doing something with it, go support them. Be the person that helps them recharge. You are directly helping the cause, because you're helping them to get back up and have the energy again to keep on fighting these things. And that might not seem like a direct help, but it really is. So things like that seem really indirect are actually a big deal. So you can get creative. Like, let's say you are really good at solving puzzles. If you want to be directly helping people, maybe you can help organize schedules for some of the community members who are trying to figure things out at your local city council. Things like that. And you don't even have to be that directly involved. Like, maybe one of your friends is a child of immigrants and they're seeing the direct impact of everything happening and feeling a lot of terror. And you can just be like, I hear you. Like, do you want someone to talk to about this? And just listen. And that's a big deal, because you're helping the people directly impacted. So all this to say that a lot is going on right now, but every little piece of what we're doing matters, and something I need to remind myself. I think a lot of people might feel like they're just catching up to all this happening, and so it's overwhelming for them. But really, a lot of the communities that we've been in have shown that it ends with us persistently keeping ourselves strong and continuing to push this message that we're not standing for whatever type of discrimination anymore, putting up that social boundary that we're not going to continue to look the other way. These things take time, unfortunately, but we can get through it much better if we are all doing it together. So do not give up. Keep doing what you can, showing up and taking care of yourself, because you can't show up if you're not taking care of yourself. Okay, I'm off my pedestal. I hope that you enjoyed this little recap and that you're having a good week despite the circumstances. And I will see you again next week. Goodbye for now.